Welcome, everybody. My name is Reggie McKnight, and I'm going to introduce Professor Rodney Morales. He's in the Creative Writing Program in the Department of English at the University of Hawaii. That's Honolulu. He is a scholar, an editor, a musician, and he is his work as a scholar, which I'm not going to talk about much, and as an editor, are sort of incontrovertibly important. But he gets to me as a fiction writer. He has Speed of Darkness, a short story collection, and 2 novels, When the Shark Bites and For a Song, unless there's more. I don't think so. But in these fiction works, he just does this remarkable work of threading together both classical and contemporary Hawaiian myths and cultures, the histories of Hawaii, which is an amazing place. And I didn't realize how little I knew about Hawaii until I began to read the work of Professor Morales. And I'm a latecomer. I'm like that guy, you know, like I didn't find out about the band Can until 2013. And so that's like 40 years late, I find out. It wasn't that long ago, but Ed introduced me to his work, and I've been very grateful. Just turns out that I'm reading For a Song, which is a kind of mystery, and not a kind of mystery, an absolute mystery. And my favorite thing is monsters. And I'm reading both these books at the same time. They're both mysteries, and they're both full of rich images and deep characterizations and a frightening knowledge you don't want to think about, but it's there anyway. So much of the work is plotted around a missing person or missing people. For it's that search for the missing. Each seeker is forced to not merely look for the lost, but to look inwardly, canvassing both one's inner world and one's outer world. And that double searching doesn't always lead to the intended solution, which is the remarkable thing about a lot of his stories. You know, you don't care about the solution, but you are exposed to 1,000 truths. Most of them unpleasant, quite a few of them horrific, and mercifully a handful of them enlightening and edifying and necessary. I think that's all I'm going to say. There's one more thing. Very bad at this sort of thing, with respect to my own work too. But Rodney Morales has many titles back here for sale, and these happy folks in the back would be more than delighted to sell them to you. And maybe you can talk them into signing a few. Without any further stalling, Professor Rodney Morales.
Thank you, Reginald, for the great introduction. And I want to thank people who brought me here and have been making it very comfortable here. Ed Pavlik especially, who somehow mysteriously discovered my work. He claims he saw this picture of me and my son, and it caught his attention, and that's how it began. Thank you, Ed. And thank you, Christine, you're not here, but thank you for helping set things up. And Amy and Jeanette and names I can't remember, all of you involved with Creative Writing Program here. But I really should just start by saying aloha. Aloha. Yeah, you got it. When we greet in Hawaii, you greet back. Yeah, beautiful. I Well, I like being funny, and sometimes I can't. Sometimes just like get deadly serious, and, just loosen things up, make it worth your while, and all that. So maybe there'll be a few funny moments, but I want to start sober. I want to start with a very sober comment because I don't know if I can even do this. It's a very emotional thing for me. Today's, see, happening already. March 23rd, 2017. Today would have been the 67th birthday of George Helm. You never heard of him, I'm sure. Most of you haven't. Have you heard? How's it? Joe, of course. Joe and Beth from Hawaii. He was our hero, our cultural hero. As a young man, he came from a small island, Molokai, grew up son of a farmer, one of many kids. He went to St. Louis, a Catholic school on Honolulu, faced culture shock with being in the big city of Honolulu. And it is a big city, by the way. Skipping a few years, in 1976, by then he was very politicized, understanding what had happened to his Hawaiian people. I'm not Hawaiian ethnically. My family, Puerto Rican family, came to Hawaii to work the plantations around the year 1900. And all these different ethnic groups came to these plantations around then, Japanese, Chinese, Filipino, you name it. And all we did together is basically mix together and have babies, and be a very multicultural, multi-ethnic place. But it's still a very Hawaiian place. And George Helm knew how subdued the Hawaiian community was, and he became an activist, and he fought very hard for Hawaiian concerns, and for everybody, not just for Hawaiians. He was an amazing spokesperson. At age 25, he led a group of 9 people to the island of Kaho'olawe, which was being bombed by the US Navy, target practice. Essentially, I go through my days in Honolulu and thereabouts, not even thinking about the military at all, because you don't even see it, but if you travel around the island, you'll see Schofield Barracks, you'll see the Kaneohe Marine Base, where Obama goes all the time to exercise and surf the waves. There's Bellows. The military came in, especially after Pearl Harbor, and just took a lot of Hawaiian land on every island. But they were bombing this one island, this beautiful island, and these people decided to put a stop to it. And George Helm emerged as their leader. And he was just an amazing person. He just spoke in a voice that everyone heard. And when people didn't hear him, when he couldn't get through with his words, he got through with his music, because it turned out he was quite the musician too. He never lived to make an album. Luckily for us, he was recorded one night playing in a restaurant. The owner of the restaurant just happened to turn on a tape recorder, and that's all we got of him in terms of recordings. I'm going to read a few lines give an idea of the way he speaks. And this is an image of him, roughly around age 25. And I first heard him on the radio. He was always going to this show to speak about the problems Hawaiians were having. And it was like a rock and roll station, but they gave him the space for that. And this one thing that I recorded on KKUA radio is George Helm saying, and you could hear his breath between phrases, that. when I walk down to Kohala, and I walk house to house in Hana, and I walk house to house in Molokai, I go down to Waimanalo and Nanakuli, and I see all the Hawaiian people, I get insulted at the easy display of ignorance by the politicians. They're using statistics to define the problems, and they ain't gonna know the problem until they sit down and look the people in the eye. It takes a lot of stripping away. And I never heard someone speak like that. I mean, there's a bit of Malcolm X and Mandela and MLK, all those guys in him, but there's also the musician. There's also, I found out when I did research, he was a class clown. I mean, it's really like finding out how colonized your world is, you lose some of your humor. But I don't think he never really lost it, but you know, life did make him a little more serious. And 14 months after, you know, the landing on Kaho'olawe, which led to a lot of protests, a lot of occupation, sounds familiar? Occupation of the island and all that. There were two guys occupying the island, determined not to leave till the Navy stops bombing, and the Navy was going to resume bombing. So George Helm and two other people went to rescue those people. George Helm was never seen again, age 26, 2 weeks short of his 27th birthday. So let's listen to him sing. It might not be what you expect, because he was a very traditional musician. That's him on guitar too.
And your wonderful charms are ever in my memory. I recall when I held in my arms an angel sweet, so heavenly. Empty without you. I miss that magic about you. Magic beside the sea. Magic of Waikiki.
Going into the next song, I'm sorry. Boricuas in Hawaii, Puerto Ricans in Hawaii. How can that be? My God, what do they think of next? Going from island to island. But you know, George Helm, I mean, he's an amazing person. And you know, our paths crossed hardly, but I know a lot of his friends. I got to know his family really well. Got to hang out with his best friend, Emmett Aluli, who was a doctor, who continued the battle, and they finally got the Navy to stop the bombing. But then the cleanup was a mess. I mean, they got about $500 million, and it's still dangerous. Much too much ordnance. Anyway, happy birthday, George Helm. And if it wasn't his birthday, I would have started this way. I would have started by saying, when I was invited to Georgia, I thought, well, great, I get to see my nieces. I have 2 nieces who live outside of Atlanta. One of them is here, Tammy, with her husband, Richard. Yay! And too bad TJ can't make it with her brood of kids. But I'll see them in the weekend. But the other reason I came was, and especially Athens, I wanted to come to Athens quite specifically to get my initials back. That makes sense to you, right? Let's try this. It's on 0 volume, that's why. There's an E between Rodney and Morales.
Oh, life is bigger, and you are not me. Things that I would go to, distance in your eyes. Oh no, I said too much. I said it out.
That's you in the corner. That's you in the spotlight. Using my initials. Know if I can do it. Oh no. Oh no, I said too much. I haven't said enough. Thank you, Michael Stein. No royalties even, nothing sliding my way.
You know,
Rodney
like
E.
sitting out
Morales.
next door, right? We could go grab them, drag them over.
Or Creature Comforts or what? I'll find him, I'll track him down. Mills, Barry, Buck. Didn't Barry leave early on? I like that they retired, Who retires from rock and roll, Rock music, they retired. Like, cool, it's like, besides Bill Withers, nobody retires. And like, Mick Jagger's like 80 and he can't retire. I mean, like, what is it? This is supposed to be a reading, right? So I'll start reading. But like, it said 7 to 9, I'm like, no way. No way. But I took a long time to write this novel because it's, good 500 pages, 600 manuscript pages. And what I set out to do was, I wanted to write a mystery novel, a detective novel. I was teaching mystery fiction. I really got to enjoy that late in my career after teaching so many other kinds. I used to teach local literature, Hawaii literature, kind of let people know we're right here. We're writers too. And so just promoting all my fellow writers and, teaching all the traditional stuff, a lot of Faulkner and everybody else. But then I started getting really interested in mystery fiction, and I found that, we live in such a corrupt world, and this whole idea of noir, this whole darkness, it's been a theme throughout my career from The Speed of Darkness, and I wanted to embrace that in some way through literature, and so I created a detective. And the other thing that went into this was after I wrote my first novel, When the Shark Bites, which actually is a line from Mac the Knife, some of you might know that, and there's a Bobby Darin motif, there's a, Three Penny Opera motif going on in that. And I love playing with songs because there's a side of me that's a musician and songwriter, so I can't help it. But when I set out to do this, I said, okay, none of that. I'll make no song references. Now, you know, I have a detective story, a straight detective story, none of that music stuff, you know. And so I started writing, and then before you know it, it's like I'm realizing, oh, the father of the missing man had written a song. It just came to me that way, like, and part of it because, you know, I'd been reading about songs being stolen, people not getting proper credit. I just ran into Trummy Young's daughter. He's a famous trombone player. I got to know her, and she's telling me how her dad didn't get credit for the song Traveling Light that Johnny Mercer wrote the lyrics to. Johnny Mercer from Savannah. And Johnny Mercer said, hey, give Trummy Young credit, you know. I mean, you know, that kind of stuff. But there's so many stories. There's the story of Solomon Linda, who wrote this great, great melody that's so unforgettable. It's made millions for so many people and has entertained so many people. And people have swiped at it, people have borrowed it, people have taken it, but Solomon Linda died penniless. You might know this song. I don't have the right version, but back to R.E.M. That's enough. This guy improvised that in the 1930s. And then they worked on it, and then it became a song. Peter Seeger added some stuff to it. They called it Wimoway or something. And he was making money off it, but he said, send this money, send a check to Solomon Linda. And they never did. I think they sent him one check, or Seeger did. And he found out many decades later that they hadn't followed through. A guy named George Weiss added more lyrics, and he got millions. And then I got Lion King, you know, I mean, it's quite a really wild story, but basically it was a major ripoff of an African writer from South Africa. His daughters some things have been corrected, and his daughters or grandchildren, I think, are now receiving royalties. So that kind of went in, so the whole thing about not making any song reference kind of went out the window. And I think I should start reading. It begins with this phrase, or this sentence, under the chapter, well, it's part 1, The Glint of Diamonds, and it begins with, I wasn't prepared for her. So it's a story about, of course, a woman arriving, and before we get to her arrival, we get a gambling story, which I'll skip. Got to get the book to hear that story. But the gambling story, well, anyway, next time we see our detective, we're back at that moment when she's arriving, many pages later, and she's arriving at his boat, and he's just moving into this boat. Excuse me. Monday, May 30th. I'm sorry, I can't even read my own writing. Monday, May 21st. I wasn't prepared for her. Standing in freeze frame in my sloop, thinking about renaming it Bill or George, anything but Suze, a name only a trial lawyer could love, I watched her materialize. She seemed to have come with the weather, the slight northern breeze that had blown away the mugginess of the past week. No longer a soft focus watercolor, she was dramatically real as she stepped up to my slip, checked the number, it appeared, saw me gazing at her and asked if I was David Apano. When I nodded, she introduced herself as Minerva Alter. She was a lean though voluptuous blonde, wearing a shorty mu'umu'u. Spaghetti straps held this nothing of a dress up, exposing tanned, well-toned shoulders. She looked to be in her mid-50s. If 40 was the new 20, a claim I did not challenge, perhaps to assuage my having turned that corner, she was visible proof that a double nickel may just be the new 35. Is this your office, she said? For now. I put down the bag of rubbish I was about to take to the nearby trash bin, helped her onto the boat, and had her sit on the only deck chair. The cabin was a mess of boxes, not ready for visitors, and had I known someone would come so soon, I'd have stocked my mini fridge with drinks. And you are a private detective. Yes, absolutely. I discreetly buttoned the top buttons of my loose-fitting rayon shirt. It was frayed from wear, and I liked it that way. My watch said it was 9:30, and my stomach wanted breakfast. I had earlier settled for coffee. I don't know how to say it, but to say it. Are you good? I'm not good with self-evaluations. Better you ask some former client. I could give you some names. I don't want any names, references, or whatever. I just want someone who knows what they're doing. Someone, look, I saw your card. She crossed her legs, fiddled with her handbag. She pulled out what looked to be a change purse, opened it, snapped it shut. I've never hired a private eye before, and I need somebody good. She opened her purse again, put out a cigarette pack, then put the pack back, and snapped the purse shut. If she asked me if smoking was allowed, I would have to say yes, just stop doing that, and then I'd light up myself. She must have sensed my ambivalence, for she followed with, if you know someone who's better suited for my case, I'll pay you for that information. While she was shoving the purse back into her handbag, I noted her accessories, a diamond ring, diamond earrings, a jade bracelet. I could have made a few bucks by offering her a name or two and calling it a day. I cleared my throat. It all depends what you're asking for, ma'am. Going to an agency has its advantages. They may have more reach, more access to certain resources. The cost could be prohibitive, though, at least $1,000 up front. Then $120 per day plus expenses. If you're lucky, she's found within the week. If it goes on for, say, we're talking $4.5 minimum, she shut her eyes. Maybe to do some mental calculations. She opened her eyes and said, I don't care how much it costs. On the other hand, an agency would have several cases going and may not be as quick to follow up on things. I work alone, so I don't have to check in with anyone and can go wherever a case takes me. I wondered if it was a wayward husband case. She must have been a stunner well into her 40s, though I now noticed some telltale grays among the blonde strands. Her diamond ring earring sparkled. When she fingered a loose strand to put it behind her ear, her jade bracelet slipped an inch toward her elbow. If you could just tell me what it is you want, I told her, I could make my best recommendation. I want you to find my daughter. I see. Is this a missing child case? If so, fuck me. How old is she? She dug through her handbag and put a small photo album and handed it over. I opened the compact album and immediately saw the smiling face of a little child holding hands with a beautiful blonde. I groaned. The recent photos are in the back, Minerva said. My God, that's you? Damn, she was beautiful. Still is in a certain light. Minerva Alter nodded absently. As I skimmed through the dozen or so photos, I saw the transformation. A little girl with no front teeth standing next to a dark, leather-skinned man in shades. That same girl with her mom, a gangly, awkward teenager with braces. A high school graduate in a white gown bedecked with lei. Standing between mom and a pale, balding fella. A 20-something woman in a pareo, then on stage in an evening dress, wearing a crown and holding a bouquet of flowers. The final photo seized me. There she was staring at the camera, challenging it, not surrendering herself to its probing lens. She no longer bore the sweetness of childhood. She looked to be in her mid-20s. It was an outdoor photo. There was ocean and what appeared to be two little islands behind her. Is this her? Yes, that's Caroline. You recognize her? No, she's striking. Mixed, huh? Her father's Hawaiian Chinese on his mother's side. He never was sure about his real father. Thinks he was a mix of Filipino and either Puerto Rican or Portuguese. My prospective client looked Scandinavian. Her weather-beaten skin suggested some previous involvement with sun worship. I shut the photo album. Where is her father, I said, cutting to the chase. That question usually answered a lot of others. Valley of the Temples, Cemetery Lot 46B. Sorry. It was a long time ago. He was murdered. What's his name? Lino Johnson. I tightened my grip on the album. That was a left hook from out of nowhere. The murder of Leno Johnson was a seminal event in local lore. He was shot point blank on a Chinatown street almost 2 decades ago. There were suspects, a couple of career criminals with gunpowder residue all over their mitts and arms, but no ballistics match. And since police found little beyond the circumstantial stuff, no one ever went to trial. As far as they were concerned, the killer or killers had done society a favor. Do you have any idea who killed him? That's ancient history as far as I'm concerned. Right now, I'm only interested in finding my daughter. Are you up for this? Yeah, sure. I'm up for it. But I'm going to need your help. Of course. I need her home address, any information you can give me about her workplace, her habits, her relationships. I need to know the names of friends, acquaintances, any interesting characters she may have been in contact with, anyone she might have had any kind of beef with. She's been living on the North Shore, works in film, loves the beach, has a... Wait, hang on a second. I stepped down to the cabin and returned with a pen and pad. You were saying? She's been staying on the North Shore with her boyfriend Matthew. When she has stuff to do in town, she stays with me. Her mailing address? Never thought of where she gets her mail. Very little comes to my place, so I'm guessing that most of her mail is going to the North Shore residence. So this North Shore residence, that's Matthew's family home. It's only his mom now and the assortment of grandkids she gets stuck with. Have you talked about this with Matthew's mom? Every day. She hasn't seen or heard from either of them. Maybe they needed some privacy based on what you've told me. Matthew and Caroline have their own space, an add-on that she and Matthew built. She's the type that needs her space, which is why she's also done some house sitting. I think that helps when you have disagreements. I wrote down house sitting. Do they fight much, she and Matthew? Oh dear, don't let me give you the wrong impression. They're passionate about everything. If they fight, it comes from that passion. They love each other dearly. You were mentioning film work? Yes, that's a big part of her life. She's been investing all of her time and energy into an independent film she starred in and helped produce. I don't know if it'll ever get released. As far as I know, she's been living off of grants and the money Matthew brings home. He's a lifeguard. Money problems? I wouldn't say that. She just happens to be in a business where making money is a crapshoot. It hasn't paid off yet. Her hands shook like she needed a cigarette. I wasn't offering. Here's a dumb question. Where's Matthew? My guess is he's with her. I've talked with Connie, that's Matthew's mom, and she told me that except for a phone call from Matt on Mother's Day, she hasn't even seen or heard from either of them since May 3rd. That's the day they left on what was supposed to be a short trip to the mainland. They do travel, mind you, sometimes for weeks at a time. But Caroline has always called me. That's the thing I don't get. She's always checked in, every few days. That does seem odd. I didn't want to say disturbing. I jotted down some notes. First I figured they went sailing, she said while I was writing. Matthew has a sailboat. Maybe that's your answer, I said as I put the notepad in my shirt pocket and opened the photo book again. There's no cell phone tower in the middle of the Pacific. I perused the pictures. That's what I thought. Then I learned that his boat is still docked in Heia. The boat harbor? She nodded, looked toward the horizon. She didn't like what she saw, so she looked straight at me. I'm confused. I don't know if she's with Matthew. They did have a falling out a month ago, and she did stay with me a couple of days, but they made up. He said she likes the beach. I was looking at the last photo, shot from her waist up, wearing a bikini top. Caroline had to have been standing near the shoreline. The color of the water behind her was turquoise green. When she's not working, she's always at the beach, usually Kailua, where Matthew works as a lifeguard, or at Lanikai. I went there a few days ago. Seems kind of hopeless, asking people if they've seen her. I showed them pictures, nothing. I talked with a couple of Matthew's fellow lifeguards at Kailua Beach. They haven't seen him. How much of the area did you cover? She tisked. Not much. Those beaches are huge. Thought I would get sunstroke. She took a breath. I've been making calls, going from beach to beach. You know how many beaches there are just on the windward and northern shores? Way too many when you're looking for someone. She looked defeated. I began to realize I don't know how my daughter spends her days. I know she was recutting the film, but where does she do that? I'm going crazy. I held the open photo book so we both could look at it and pointed to the last photo. This was definitely taken at Lani Kai. That's the Mokulua's way in the background, see? The two islets were set back on the right. The photographer had taken pains to get the tiny islands in the picture. Blown up and framed, this photo would look great on a wall. Whoever took this picture has an artistic eye. My guess it was Matthew. He's good. I've used several different cameras and telephoto lenses when working cases. A couple of my cameras have a portrait mode to ensure that the subject remains clear while the backdrop remains fuzzy. When you're doing it in a hurry, which is often the case in my line of work, you want to dial in the aperture beforehand and hope your preset gets you the shot you want. Matthew, if he's the one that took this shot, knew exactly what he was doing. I shut the photo book and looked at Minerva. I'll need names, friends, acquaintances, probably the same people you've called. And I'd probably check out the same areas she'd gone to. I told myself maybe there was something she had missed. She fingered through her bag and pulled out a folded a piece of paper, unfolding it as she handed it to me. Here, it's a list of the people she hung out with, names and numbers, including Caroline and Matthew's cell phone numbers and the North Shore address. Good, just what I need. So on he goes on his mission. First he drops off his car to get it serviced while planning his scheme, and he goes to the, if you know anything about the island of Oahu, it's divided almost like, by a mountain that cuts across. So there's Honolulu, and then there's the windward side. There's also, of course, there's more to it than that, but that's essentially. And people, sometimes who live in Honolulu, almost never go to the other side, and same the other way. And some do all the time, some just simply commute. So he's going to cross over to the much more lush, way less developed side of the island and start canvassing the beach. And then he finds a kid who recognizes the picture he shows him, and that leads him to this producer's house. The person she's house sitting for is a movie producer, or that she's house sit for. And then when he goes there, he runs into some other woman who also house sits, a woman named Mia. And when he tries to be really discreet about following her and all that, she stops him and says, "Why are you looking for Kay?" And that's Caroline's nickname, Kay. So I'm going to jump kind of ahead and read another chapter where after this encounter with Mia, he's driving home and he stops at Valley of the Temples and sees a pikake lei. It's a jasmine lei, very fragrant lei, and he picks a few buds from it. It's a lei on the grave, and he's trying to sort out this whole calendar thing, because May Day, May 1st, is a huge day in Hawaii, not just because of communism, but because it's a day when people give leis, and it's a very a day of celebration, Hawaiian culture celebration, and growing up in Hawaii, we always had May Day festivities. So, but it's too far past May Day for the lei to still be as fresh as it is. So he has to go to some guy who really knows flowers. Hang on a second. Some of you haven't heard Hawaii Pidgin, yeah? Some of my characters speak Pidgin, some don't, we speak such an array of languages, and there's such a, from a spectrum of, in the range, and from extreme full-on Pidgin that even I can hardly decipher. Like, the baka broke the rage already or something, and to the way more of us speak, which is mostly English, but few words thrown in. So he goes to see North Shore Willie. And he gives us some of his own background at the same time. Excuse me. Like most kids who grew up on the Oahu's North Shore, I rode the waves. Practically lived on the beach. I gave all that up, however, after a life-altering incident at the Banzai pipeline. It wasn't a coral below that did me in. It was a guy running over me, hitting me with his board, cutting my head open. That same guy rescued me, though he got pounded in more ways than one afterwards. The unwritten law was when someone takes the wave in front of you, you back off. Absolutely no hot dogging. I survived. He survived. But while I was able to get back in the water after the wound healed, transitioning from the rigors and dangers of big wave riding to small wave bodyboarding, Willie Kahaimokul had lost all desire, lost that spirit that had driven him to be one of the best upcoming surfers on the North Shore. I don't know if that was good or bad. He joined the military, became quite adept with all kinds of weaponry. He also developed quite an affinity for cannabis. When he returned from his 2-year stint, he began to grow his own. When he learned all he could about soil conditions, lighting, fertilizing, you name it, and this knowledge went towards other type of plants as well. He now ran an orchid growing operation in Waimanalo. Since his plant nursery was not so far off the beaten track, before heading to town, I thought I'd pay him a visit. I took Kumuhau all the way up to Waikupanaha. Love those Hawaiian street names. A lush yet desolate road. When the trees weren't obscuring the view, you could gaze up at the Ko'olau Mountains. Up close and personal, they were a profound presence. I passed groups of cyclists, no doubt training for some event. They all wore shades, helmets, and bright jerseys. Visible yet incognito. I wonder if Mia ever biked this stretch of road. Mia is, of course, Kay's friend. The muggy weather that had been forecast on last night's news was beginning to kick in as I pulled up at North Shore Willie's, the land of orchids. As I stepped out of my Corolla, I could feel the rise in humidity. Better for orchids than for people. "Hey, Kavika," he shouted when he saw me. "Long time, bro." He put down the orchid pot he was carrying, lifted his LA Dodgers baseball cap, and used his t-shirt sleeve to wipe his sweaty forehead. He wiped his hands on his cut-off jeans and held his hand out for a palm-on-palm handshake, followed by a chest-to-chest embrace. "Yeah, stitches finally came out." Willie rubbed the back of my head. "Still get the lump, brother." The incident had created a bond between victim and so-called assailant. I still felt some guilt. He was destined for the pro surfing tour. I would have fallen plenty short of that. But the accident set our lives in trajectories neither one of us would have considered otherwise. I wondered if he wrestled with regret. "Say, brah," I pulled out the pikake buds from my shirt pocket. He put a hand on my shoulder. "Brah, if that's what you're smoking nowadays, I got the number of the rehab place you need to get into." I'm trying to figure out when these buds were fresh. "Shit, brother, you come visit me for the first time like in ages, and instead of us having a drink and a smoke, you want to ask me about dry flowers?" He wiped his brow again. "Freaking hot today." "I'm on a case, Willie." "Yeah, and afterwards we should drink a case. Some ice cold beer, bro. In fact, you should just stay over, bro. Spend the night. Relax. Lana and the boys are gonna be home about 7. Stay, brother. Honolulu gonna drive you nuts." "Yeah, but it pays the bills." "Shit, you live on this side, you know more bills." "Okay, you win. Now it's about these buds. I get some really good buds, if you know what I mean, in the back." "Yes, I do know what you mean. This guy grew some legendary shit. I hadn't took the stuff in ages, and I wasn't planning to anytime soon." "Come on, Willie." I placed the pikake buds in his hand. Okay, let me put on my forensic plantology hat." Willie turned his cap around and held one of the buds up high, perhaps to acknowledge that bright sunlight was the best forensic tool in the universe. "What date is it?" He seemed to be enjoying playing CSI. "It's Tuesday, May 22nd. "Where you got this from? On hot date?" "I got it from Valley of the Temples." "From one grave?" "Yeah." Willie began to feel the gravity of my request. "And you're trying to figure out when place to lay?" "Approximately. A phenomenological premise, if ever there was one. Shit, even Sherlock Holmes would find this daunting. My best guess is, he took a whiff. "Gotta be about a week, maybe 6-7 days. Best I can do, brother." "You sure now?" "Depends on the flower shop. Willie twirled the buds between his thumb, index, and middle fingers. Pikake, also known as Jasminam Sambak, Meale Puti, Sambagita, that's what the Filipinos call them. You know that pikake is the Hawaiian word for peacock? Now it was etymology 101. Had to be patient with Willie. Must be a princess connection. You got it, brother. Princess Kaiulani was fond of the flower. And peacocks, go figure. You mentioned flower shops. Oh yeah. What I was going to say is that sometimes they freeze the flower for make them last. Problem is, when they do that, the bug dry out more fast. This is definitely 5 or 6 days. As in what? As in, I know what you stay thinking. You stay thinking May Day is Lay Day. That's the day everybody put flowers, excepting for Memorial Day, of course. But we're not there yet. I tell you now, no way could be May Day. Wouldn't look like this. He sniffed the buds again. Still got that smell. So about a week then. You know that more ladies get sold on May Day than any other day of the year? Who would have thought? Who would have thought? Are you mocking me, brother? Sorry. I put a hand up, put on a more serious smirk. And this year, Willie continued, hard for score pikake. That's because some of the crop got lost during the heavy rains. All in the timing. Prices shoot up. What do you do times you lose money? I do what I always do. Bite the bullet, tighten the belt, ride the frickin' wave. I saw the next line coming. Not sure Willie's standard sage advice. Gotta go with the flow, brother. So about a week then, less than a week, he handed me the pikake bud, 6 days max. That really helps, bro. So what about, he pressed his thumb and index finger together, put them against his lips and made a sucking sound. Paper beats stone, stone beats scissors, and camaraderie trumps everything. I said nothing. I simply followed North Shore Willie into his lair, a garage filled with tools, lumber, and if you knew where to look, the most potent of stashes. I drove past Rabbit Island around Makapu, made the turn around the Kaiwi coast. The marijuana-induced buzz had put me in the perfect mood to appreciate the starkly beautiful surroundings, but in a poor state of mind to do justice to my new case. I guiltily remembered Minerva's refrain, "Are you good?" I dug into my shirt pocket, felt the 2 huge joints Willie had insisted I take with me. "Help you chill out," he had said. "Are you good?" she had asked. "I'm working at it." And then, where are we in time? I don't want to keep you too long. What are we usually? 10, 15 more. Okay. So he goes to the North Shore. So he had gone crossed over to the windward side, and if you know anything about Oahu, you're on the windward side and you follow the coast all the way up, all the way up and around the top and around, and then you're at the most famous surf area in the world. And that's where the Serrano family lives, Matthew's family. So he goes there, and he talks to the mom, Connie, who's going crazy with her grandkids. One of her children, or one of her children all grown up, but one of them's a recovering meth addict. Another one's going through a divorce, another one's, and so she's watching the kids a lot and going crazy. And she has time to worry about her missing son, who seems to be missing with the missing woman. And he enters the house, and then she shows him their room, which is an add-on. So I'm going to read a little bit from there. It was an artist's room, not only because of the easel and the paintbrushes and the cans of paint of all sizes that sat off-center, not only because of the guitar on a stand in a corner next to an old upright piano, not just because of the large work table that ran along one wall, a work table that featured an editing machine, a mixing board, a projector, a boombox, lots and lots of loose papers and photos, paper clips, post-its, staplers, pens and pencils, a set of drawing pencils, and more, not only because of the tea leaf plant in one corner, or the funky shoe rack in the other, or the two surfboards, one short, one long, that stood next to the shoe rack, not only because there were drawings, paintings, and photos on one wall, including pictures of blues artist John Lee Hooker and Natty Mae Thomas, a child's drawing of a man I presume to be Lino with ukulele in hand, autographed surf photos, and a blow-up of the photo I carried, the one of Kay on the beach with the Mokoloas in the background. Not only because the ceilinged high, built-in bookshelf next to the artwork houses many CDs and DVDs as it did books, not only because of the cleverly designed little cutaway part that led to a walk-in closet bathroom, not only because the walls constructed mostly of pine blended in nicely with the shelves that were made of cedar, not only because the wall above the work table was painted over with plants, creating a trumped low effect that complemented the one in Connie's living room, not only because the placement of the bed was such that when you got up in the morning, you saw the ocean and had such a clear view of the waves at sunset that you should be the one giving the surf report. It was the collective feeling of all these that made it an artist's room. I hit middle C on the piano, then tried a C chord. It was slightly out of tune. I walked over to the funky bedstand. Upon it sat another photo, this one a shot of a young couple locked in embrace. Both of them wore leis, but were otherwise topless. The woman was Kay, showing some side boob, so I figured the guy had to be Matthew. A kid came running from behind me and picked up the photo. "Look, can see Auntie Kay's the kind," he said. "Keanu, put that down." The shout came from Connie, standing by the door. Keanu did as asked. "Nice photo," I said to her. Normally I'd agree, but with kids around, everything seems R-rated. Didn't know what Matthew looked like. Now you do. Keanu ran to the piano. "She's got a new beau." My daughter Janice. The one who called? Because she had been interrupted by a phone call. Connie nodded. "She sounded good, high on love. Hope it's just that. Couldn't find it in me to tell her that Matthew's..." She couldn't finish. Keanu was banging on the piano now. He didn't know chords, but he had a sense of rhythm. "Keanu, please, we're talking." The kid ran off. Connie handed me a Ralph Lauren gift bag, receipts, ticket stubs. I put everything I could find in that may seem relevant. "This is great, thanks." I did a quick scan of the contents and pulled out what looked like a blank statement. It was for April. This one especially could be useful. Any expenditure related to travel could reveal something. Too bad the May statement doesn't come into early June. We'd need a password to see it online. You have any ideas how Matt constructed his passwords, or any idea that he might have them? Connie shook her head. I didn't think so. So he starts saying about the draconian ways to figure out a password, an issue he'll come up with again later on, But when Connie leaves, Matthew's mother leaves, the room, he continues scouring through, goes through the CD collection, the DVDs, the books, everything. And when he pulls out a book, a piece of paper falls out with 3 names on it. Blankenship, well, 2 are names, Blankenship, Kamana. And the first is the word herb or herb. He can't tell it out of context. So that begins to be something that will haunt him, because he is very aware about this alleged crime lord, who's also a state senator by the name of Kamana, Josiah Kamana. And that name will keep coming up in this story, and in connection to his missing girl. Almost. I mean, one little bit more, and we'll call it an evening. If you want, maybe I'll take a few questions too if there's time. But I just wanted to end with this little piece. It was, this is noir, so, and maybe the parts I've read don't give you that indication yet, but it gets really noir, and some further you go in, and if you're going to go noir, you got to go to Chinatown, right? You got to go to Chinatown. It was drizzling in Chinatown in the late afternoon when I tracked down Aaron AA Battery Chun. Way back when, in his cop days, he was notorious for beating up suspects, committing his own form of A and B, hence the nickname. Chun was a useful, if off-putting son of a bitch, an off-the-record source of information on anyone and anything that happened around town. While still a cop, he participated, for reasons I could never understand, in a holdup. He was the driver. The idiot used his unmarked police car. Because he cooperated, and thanks to his lawyer's plea bargaining, he got off on a petty charge and was dismissed from the force. According to McMichaels, that's his mentor, the PI's mentor, Aaron later got a job with the Taxi and Limousine Drivers Union, the same union that Lino had belonged to, and somehow lost that job. When I met this guy several years ago, he was working security at some condo complex. God, give me a nickel for every disgraced cop who becomes a security officer. Double A wasn't hard to find, a few phone calls and I knew his main hangouts. Sure enough, I found him standing outside the Wolf-Fat building, a relic with a deep history and up-to-the-minute notoriety. Lino Johnson had been killed right across the street. Just recently, police disrupted a major casino operation on the building's second floor and busted over 24 players. Since it was a misdemeanor, those arrested paid their fines and looked for another place to roll the dice. What's up, Aaron? Still shaking, brother. How about you? Can't complain. His leanness made him look tall, but we stood eye to eye. His black hair seemed to come from a tube, and it framed sagging jowls and features that gave the illusion of gravitas to his Hawaiian Chinese visage. He had a toothpick in his mouth. I'd never seen him without one. As he talked, it bobbed up and down, and you wanted to do something about it, but what? We shook hands. I stood next to him. We both faced the street. How's the crime beat? That was mildly surprising. Thought he, of all people, would have known about my surreal departure from the Star Gazette, because our detective had been a reporter previously. Done with that shit. I'm a PI now. Smart move. Private is the way to go, brother. He pulled the toothpick out of his mouth and waved it like a baton. People just hang on to their fucking government jobs for the pension, for the security. That shit is for the birds. He popped the toothpick back in. I didn't want to tell him that newspaper jobs are private industry, and that if I'd had a government job, I'd be singing tweet, tweet. What kind of investigation you do? The usual, trying to find lost children, tracking horny husbands, horny wives. Gee, maybe you can track my wife. I know the bitch they're giving it to someone, because you sure ain't giving it to me. That's because you're giving it to all those bar girls. Yeah, but they don't count. Tell your wife that. I did. There's your answer. What answer? Why she ain't giving it to you, you dumb fuck? Turn around. By the way, you got any scoops on Josiah Kamana, the senator? Blood literally left his face. Yeah. What's his thing? What you mean? I heard he likes girls young. I mean real young and oriental. Oh man, no, not him. He not like that. Aaron was practically blushing. Sorry. You know those fucking rumors, especially in politics, so damn malicious. That's why you don't see me running for office. We shared a good laugh over that thought. Then he threw his chewed up toothpick in the gutter near the drain and pulled out a new one from the top pocket of his Charlie Sheen bowling shirt. By the way, remember Lino Johnson? He pointed downwards. Killed on this very street. Jeez Louise, why you stay asking about him? And Kamana, brother, what you stay digging into? Lino's daughter is missing. I pulled out her picture. He squinted at it. Shit, how one guy like him would get one daughter that looked like that? I myself couldn't square her dazzling beauty with my memory of Lino Johnson's heavily pockmarked face. His wife's jeans, maybe? Well, you know him, always getting into some lady's jeans. I didn't know him. Didn't make him for a womanizer either. Gee, the daughter missing. About 2.5 weeks now. Fuck. Let me ask around. See if anybody heard anything. By the way, those brothers still around, Joe and Curtis? Why? He lost his color again. You think they know something? Doubt it. Just wondering whatever happened to those guys. I don't see him around anymore. Well, he's still around. He's still hanging around Waikiki Beach doing his, Joe's still hanging around Waikiki Beach doing his Beach Boy shit. I'm not sure about Curtis though. Who the fuck knows what the buggers are doing nowadays? Yeah, I should tell you, Joe, he kind of funny in the head. You know, like those PSTD veterans. PTSD? Yeah, post-stress, whatchamacallit. He not the same. He's like on a surfboard and bang his head or something. Sorry to hear that. I didn't think a surfboard would do any damage to that old bull. A train maybe. Good guy though. Thanks, man. I shook his hand and slipped a nicely folded pair of 20s into his shirt pocket, adding in a conspiratorial whisper about the missing girl. Just ask people you trust. Don't want the whole world to know just yet. You know what I mean? My saying that guaranteed that every other lowlife would know in a matter of hours. I had always suspected some link between Aaron and Kamana and his scummy associates. It was time to ruffle some feathers and yet watch out so they don't tear out mine.